Hi guys, welcome! In this video, we'll dive into the detailed skill analysis of Fenrir, the newest hero class coming this month in ROM. The Moon Wolf Fenrir is a ranged physical damage dealer that can inflict massive amounts of auto-attack damage from afar, mainly with his piercing arrows. We already had our first look at Fenrir in one of my previous videos. This time, we'll explore his skill mechanics and analyze his pros and cons in both PvE and PvP. Alright, without further ado, let's begin. First, let's take a look at Fenrir's core passive skill called Moonshot. Every time Fenrir performs 4 auto attacks, the next auto attack will release a piercing arrow. This piercing arrow inflicts 9 times his AA damage to all enemies within a 15 by 3 meter area in front of him. Since the piercing arrow's path is long and narrow, precise positioning is required to ensure that it reaches enemies in the backline. When Fenrir's core passive reaches level 4, the number of auto attacks required to trigger the piercing arrow is reduced by 1, allowing him to shoot piercing arrows more frequently. After the core passive reaches level 7, Fenrir's piercing arrow gains additional power. Against monsters, piercing arrow will deal double damage, amounting to 18 times his auto attack damage. Hence, piercing arrow is his primary source of damage in PvE. When targeting other players, piercing arrow will inflict HP loss damage equal to 10% of the target's current HP. Thus in PvP, Fenrir deals a combination of AA damage and HP loss damage. In order to unleash Fenrir's maximum damage potential, it's necessary to level up his core passive to level 7. Next, let's take a look at Fenrir's skills that can amplify his auto attack and piercing arrow's damage. First is Frost Moon Arrow, which is both a buff and a debuff skill. It converts Fenrir's attack attribute to water element and boosts his auto attack damage by 30% for 120 seconds. In addition, his auto attacks can continuously reduce the enemy's attack speed and movement speed by 30% for 5 seconds, which can stack up to 3 times. And with the related star rune, each debuff stack can also reduce the enemy's water damage reduction by up to 15%. With this skill, water would be the primary element of Fenrir. If you want to override the water element conversion, you can opt to equip elemental arrows. Next is Twilight Assault, which is a buff skill that can enhance Fenrir's burst damage potential. After each use, each of his next 5 auto attacks will release a piercing arrow, allowing him to deal huge damage in a short period of time, which is useful for boss hunting. In addition, it will boost Fenrir's physical penetration by 30%, critical damage by 50%, and attack and casting range by up to 3 meters with this star rune. This buff lasts for 30 seconds and has a cooldown of 15 seconds. However, it's better to cast it manually every 15 seconds to activate the 5 piercing arrows more often. Next is Blood Moon, which is a passive skill that increases Fenrir's damage to enemies with lower HP, wherein every 1% of the target's lost HP will grant a 2% increase in his final damage. As an example, if the target only has 50% HP, he will deal additional 100% damage. Additionally, it grants Fenrir some form of sustain when killing enemies, as he can restore his own health based on the target's remaining HP before death. Another interesting passive skill of Fenrir is Lunar Eclipse, which directly boosts his water element damage and max SP by 50%. Additionally, it prevents Fenrir from dying once every 6 seconds. When receiving a fatal blow, all his remaining SP is converted into HP and he cannot lose HP for 1 second. The conversion value is increased by his luck stat, and it is increased to 4 times in PvP and GVG maps. Next, let's take a look at his other offensive skills that can supplement his auto attacks. First is Moon Shadow Spikes, which is both an offensive and a mobility skill. Upon use, Fenrir rolls 5 meters forward and then shoots 3 piercing arrows in a fan shape, which is automatically aimed towards the nearest target, dealing damage to all enemies in the piercing arrow's path. Thus, to maximize your damage output, it's essential to position yourself as close to the target as possible after rolling, ensuring that all 3 piercing arrows will hit the target. After rolling, Fenrir will gain several effects. First, he'll gain immunity to any damage for 1 second. Second, he will automatically enter hiding status with up to plus 50% increase in movement speed for 3 seconds due to the Star and Moon Blade rune. And third, he will restore 25% of his max HP and max SP due to the Beastly Nature passive skill. Thus, Moon Shadow Spikes allows Fenrir to excel in both survival and offensive power. Take note that this skill recharges every 4 seconds and it can be charged up to 2 times, allowing it to be used twice in a row. But when equipped with his Tier 5 exclusive weapon, it can be used thrice in a row. Fenrir's other offensive skill is Moonwolf Strike, which commands the Moonwolf to bite an enemy for 8 seconds, dealing physical skill damage every second. Although each bite has a low attack multiplier, its damage can increase when it crits, as it ignores the enemy's physical defense. However, the calculation of its crit chance is pretty low, so its primary purpose will be to debuff the enemy. Moonwolf Strike can prevent the enemy from hiding and has a 30% chance to inflict bleed status for each bite. Additionally, when it crits, there's a 30% chance to apply the Moon Shackle's crowd control skill on the target due to the Wrath of the Moonwolf passive skill. This passive skill also increases the damage of Moonwolf Strike by 30%. Honestly, I don't think it will be effective in PvP since it's single target and hit is needed for this skill. Last is take a look at Fenrir's 2 crowd control skills. First, Ice Prison is Fenrir's primary crowd control skill. When placed on the ground, it will bind up to 4 enemies with magic chains, and they will suffer from various effects. First, they will be pulled to the center by 1 meter every second. Second, they will be unable to hide, accelerate, and use any displacement skill. Third, they will receive 20% more damage. Fourth, when Fenrir attacks a chained enemy using auto-attack, he will also deal damage to other chained enemies. And fifth, their skill damage bonus will be reduced by up to 80% with this star rune. The magic chains last for 8 seconds, and it has a fixed cooldown of 35 seconds. Since the control and debuff effects of Ice Prison are really good, I think having a long cooldown is just reasonable. Fenrir's other crowd control skill is Moon Shackles, where he throws a cursed shackle to bind an enemy, preventing them from moving. This control effect is unlike the usual snare, root, and immobilize status, so it cannot be countered by Edgastar card and Tokebi card. It can still be dispelled by Chronomancer's remove buff and Saint's clearance. However, if cleared by another player, the effect will be transferred to the dispeller. Another effect of Moon Shackles is it will reduce the target's physical and magic attack bonus by 80%. It has a cooldown of 12 seconds, which can be reduced by CD reduction buffs and gears, this rune, and the Beastly Nature passive skill. To summarize, Fenrir offers a lot of strengths both in PvE and PvP. First, Fenrir's long-range auto-attack playstyle is really popular in many games as it offers some form of safety while dealing damage from afar. Compared to Stellar Hunters, Fenrir has farther attack range, higher base stats, and enhanced damage multipliers. His piercing arrow deals a significant amount of damage to monsters since it is equal to 18 times his auto-attack damage. Second, while Fenrir's damage output primarily leans towards the water element, he still has an option to switch back and forth between other elements by equipping elemental arrows. This versatility enhances his adaptability against various enemy lineups. Nevertheless, water remains the strongest element for Fenrir due to the lack of innate buffs in his kit that can boost the damage of other elements. And third, Fenrir has pretty good mobility, sustain, and survival skills. Proper use of his Moon Shadow Spike skill is vital for his survival. Although he doesn't have any skill that can mitigate incoming damage, he does have an anti-fatal passive that triggers once every 6 seconds. This anti-fatal is really solid, especially when coupled with Moon Shadow Spike's 1 second immunity to damage. Moreover, he can also opt to increase his flee in PvP to further improve his survivability. But of course, there are still disadvantages. First, I find Fenrir's damage to be more efficient in 1v1 situations, such as in commodity instances, but less effective when there are multiple enemies, such as in White Star Airship. This is due to his reliance on single-target auto-attacks and the proc of piercing arrows, which have a long but narrow AoE. Thus, it's more challenging when there are several enemies scattered across the battlefield. Second, Fenrir faces counters in PvP that can significantly reduce his damage output. Strategies such as building high crit resist and crit defense, spamming light shield on self, and equipping the title set can all mitigate Fenrir's damage potential and make him less effective in PvP. Third, Fenrir's crowd control capabilities are not that strong in PvP. Skills like Frost Moon Arrow with a slow effect can be countered by Moonlight Flower Star card. Moon shackles can be easily dispelled, and Ice Prison suffers from a very long cooldown. In addition, Fenrir lacks skills that can inflict abnormal statuses or reduce the enemy's status resist, limiting the effectiveness of a crowd control focused build. And lastly, precise positioning is crucial, especially when casting Moon Shadow spikes to ensure that all 3 piercing arrows land on the target. Sudden ping spikes or network delays can cause you to roll in the wrong direction or potentially deep dive into the middle of the enemy formation, compromising his effectiveness in combat. Overall, Fenrir seems pretty strong, both in damage and survival, particularly in small-scale skirmishes. If you already built an ADL Stellar Hunter class, then investing in Fenrir will definitely be a worthy upgrade. How about you guys? Will you be playing Fenrir in the future? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll also be releasing a full guide on his PV DPS build in other videos, so stay tuned for that. Alright, that's it for this video guys. Don't forget to like if you enjoyed watching this guide. If you're new here, I would love you to consider subscribing by hitting the subscribe button down below. I would love to have you back. Thank you for watching and see you in our next episode.